Hello, guys. It's David Vosch here again in Alabama. Nice, cloudy, cool day. Somebody said it was snowing a little further north. Isn't that interesting? Seems like we've had quite a bit of rain and snow and cold weather this winter. It's raining cats and dogs over in California. Thank goodness my daughter is down in the southern part where it's not getting a lot of rain like they are up in the northern areas. Well, it's a beautiful day. I'm having a beautiful day myself. Just me and the dogs, and I've been pondering a few things. I've had a couple people write to me and say thank you about a few things and encourage me as a brother. And that helps a little bit when people, will reach out to you and say something. It's really important, I guess, that we do that. And I don't think that most of us understand the need for us to help one another, to encourage one another, and to be there for other people. A lot of times we sit around, maybe we're feeling selfish or sad or depressed, and I think a lot of times we're, I don't want to, it's certainly this video is not going to be about don't be so selfish and, and let's persevere and you're always wrong and everybody else is right. That's not what I'm saying. I want to talk about some really deep things that's going on, what I see in myself, things that have been going on, my family, but a few people synchronistically that friends of mine, I won't name names today. I do believe it's important sometimes that we have to name a name or something because certain individuals maybe cross a line and where they may not just be sad and needing encouragement, but they may be arrogantly putting forward things that are damaging others. And I think sometimes we have to stand up for that. But I don't believe that we're supposed to expose our brothers, especially in times when they are confused or in need, or they're, even if they don't even know they are. We're living in some very serious times right now. Serious because things have become more critical. Things are worse. Life is worse. And there's a lot of reasons why I say that life today is worse than it was a few years ago. I mean, you just go back and take a look at the movies and things that were playing 50 years ago, and they were more pleasant. They taught us how to be men, taught ladies how to be ladies, not perfectly. By no means did they give us a good role model 50 years ago. I mean, people were smoking and drinking and doing all kinds of terrible things and encouraging a lot of bad behavior. We had religion that was mind-melding people then. We've had death and war for all of it, as long as we can remember. I don't mean hey, let's go back to the good old days, like as if there ever was a good old day. I mean, shoot, you go back in the 1800s and people were going across the plains and, they had very little to eat. I mean, they didn't even know what was good to eat. They were eating white, refined flour and sugar, big bags of this white flour. That's all they ate. The only thing they had that was even good for them is beans. And by the way, I'm going to do another video on health coming up here pretty soon. But just, remember, beans aren't really a natural thing you would find in the world. If you go back a few hundred years, back when human beings lived in the natural world without the revolution of the industry and the agriculture that was. Why did they do? You can follow the world explosion of the population in exact measure to the exploits of the evil ones, who apparently, as we look back, had some kind of diabolical plan to destroy the world. And it literally, I suppose they could have just literally looked at it on a chart, on a scale, and they could have figured out when the whole thing was going to end, because it's like seeing a chart as it goes up, and there's a top and there's a bottom, and it can't get any worse than this. And their goal was to get to the worst predicament they could get. And one of the things they would need is overpopulation. Because no matter what you did to human beings, if there wasn't an overpopulation to where there was nowhere for human beings left, they would be herded into these places where they would be coerced into this mindset that everyone else had. If you were going to somehow find a way to deteriorate and destroy the human being, you would have to take him out of his natural progression and evolution. Because if you leave people to nature, they're going to be like nature. They're going to become natural beings. And the way that human beings have lived for millions of years is going to just keep right on going. People are going to be acting the same way. You could go out in the field and lasso people and drag them into some place and murder them and torture them, but you could only bring in as many as your horse could get. You couldn't catch all of them. They'd get away. They'd go find some place, a last frontier, and they'd start over. It was difficult to take man out. We couldn't even take him out with the mind. They couldn't destroy human beings without massive revolution. They had to start with the typewriter, and the wheel, and agriculture and industry. It had to start and grow, and little by little, and persuade and manipulation, television. So yeah, things weren't perfect in the good old days. However, if you could go back far enough, go back to Rome or something, or Media Persia, I don't know what life was like exactly, but you had a choice. If you lived in Italy, around Rome, or the area of the Middle East, or anything in the area where there were major cities, you could live in the cities. And even in those days, they had white flour. People were lying around in the adobe streets of Babylon, probably strung out on heroin. And there was religion, and you were forced, people would come along and just gather up your families and your children, take your kids off to some pedophilia, camp, and take your wife and rape her and make her a breeder to some other, sell her to some other group. It was bad, and I'm not telling you it wasn't bad. Worse in that sense. Because you had no choice if you got caught. You couldn't go to lawyers and say, hey, something happened to me and I got some money. And even now, I don't know, it's pretty hard to go to the court and win anything. But at least there's a possibility, or you could go and, we have some kind of recourse. But you don't have any recourse if you don't know what to do, if you don't really have any real options. But at least in those days, in Rome or Babylon or whatever city-state that used to be, you could, if you were strong and courageous, a pioneer, you could pack up your stuff and you could see if you could sneak out of town and go further north into the steppes of the Everest Mountains, or up in the Turkey. You could go up into Russia, where there was very few people. The problem with that, I guess, if you were out in the middle of nowhere living with your family trying to eke out an existence, which I think might not be such a bad thing. If you could bring a few people with you, you'd have some friends. But that wasn't always possible. But if you could get a few of you out somewhere, you'd live in peace for a few years, and all of a sudden somebody'd find out you were there. And some other people would be living out in the middle of nowhere, and they get hungry and cold, and they're lazy, and they don't want to work for themselves. And maybe their wife died or whatever. So then they come along and see you've got a nice young daughter, and maybe they just take her and burn you out. I mean, this could happen. So you might have peace for 5-10 years, and here comes a marauding band. So life was very difficult. It's easier now in some ways, a lot of ways, in the sense that if you were to live in a certain class in the suburbs, at least for the last maybe 50 years or whatever, you could find some kind of, you could go to attend some church and get sort of a membership. You could call the ACLU, or if somebody was doing bad to you, or there was maybe some way that you could figure a way to kind of feed your family and live in some kind of relative peace. But the problem is we had just about as many problems in other ways. Because now we could go and work and make enough money to provide for this nice, luxurious home, a nice car. Our kids might be able to live in peace and grow up in some kind of nice environment. And we have the luxury of teaching them according to our conscience. The problem is that we were being lured all this time by something on television, by violence, by feelings and beliefs of contrary opinions. We were told, hey, everybody can believe what they want. Oh, look at this book. I believe I'm an atheist. And oh, here's another one that says, anything I believe I can just manifest with my mind. Whoa. We just, and people get all excited about all these different beliefs. Sometimes they will pursue these beliefs to the exclusion of their families. Sometimes they'll join groups that maybe will give them benefits, but yet they don't know it, but they're signing their death warrant to their families because these groups aren't going to provide this little paradise, this urban paradise for nothing. You're a signed member, and if you don't toe the line, you'll find out down the road you're going to have to sacrifice one of your kids or something in order to have this utopian. So there was always something going on. We can live in a kind of cognito where most people don't know that we're so bad off we can barely move. We're laying in bed with a bottle of whiskey, begging God to take our life, right? Or people literally are. I don't think the average person understands that you're not the only one going through this. You drive by an uppity neighborhood, an urban area where it looks like people have swimming pools and the nice cars in the garage and 2-car garages and maybe a RV and anything. Wow, these people, where do they get all this money? Well, everybody's thinking that. How do they do it? Well, many of them are literally mortgaged to the kilt and worried out of their minds. They're really about to lose everything. And they know that if they do lose everything, they lose this woman that's only there because you got money, or your kids are only tolerating the parents. Because they're getting to be 16, and boy, they'll just, see you later, Dad. And you're scared they're going to end up drinking or dying somewhere along, they don't seem to have any morals. You don't know what happened. You were too busy at work trying to provide for the mortgage. And what do? If you stay home with the kids more, first of all, they don't want it now. It's over. You let them go to high school. You're just literally sitting around. It doesn't matter what's going on. You could be homeless and on the street and have less problems than these people in the urban, jungle. Who are, I don't think a lot of people realize how difficult it is. It may be more difficult to go through the pain of losing your wife that you were with for 10 years, and all the memories, and the children now they don't love you, and the kids and the grandma's upset, and or somebody's in jail. I mean, all the stuff that we go through, it could be so harrowing. It could take literally months out of our life just to get through it mentally. All we're doing is lying around popping some sort of medications. We feel like we literally want to die. That's how bad it is mentally, emotionally. We're scared somebody's going to find out what's going on in our life. So therefore, we don't even talk to our families for fear that they might find out. And, okay, 15 minutes of just talking like this, and that's not really what this video is supposed to be about. So I need to slow down here on that. That's a good place to start here. Because I really want to talk about something even worse than all of that. I'm sorry, guys. We need to talk about it. And hopefully provide a solution. Good news, right? By the time we get through this, hopefully we can give people some good news and a different perspective on some of this. Maybe we can be helpful and encourage one another and figure this out. Because it is worse than that. Because at this point, what's happened is we're afraid we've lost a member of our family to depression or, it's miserable. But there might be some hope. Okay, we've got to sit down, regroup, rethink. Hopefully, we see some counseling or, maybe you learn to get over the addiction of the pill and the bottle. You can read a book. You can start over, get on your knees, spend some weeks praying and hope that things start turning around. You still got your two legs. Physically you can get up and put your clothes on, get in your car and go to work. You're struggling to do it, but you're making it maybe. But it gets worse. There are people that get to a place that's much worse than this. There are people that get to a place where they're actually doing so well that they are trapped in such a way that there may not be any hope for them. Let's say you're a doctor and you're making $1 million a year. And without that $1 million to pay for that $1 million home and the $1 million RV and the vacation house in Florida and keep the family looking up to you and keeping your girlfriend and your wife, right? And, paying for the luxuries that you just can't live without anymore. You're going to lose it all. But like I said, that's not the worst thing. The worst thing is that the reason that you're there is that you have now accepted it as a viable existence. And you can't even imagine why you're in this situation. I mean, it never comes up into your mind that maybe you should just stop being a doctor. Maybe it's immoral. Maybe the reason that your life is turned upside down and all of your family and everybody that you know and all your neighbors isn't because life is hard or you got to get through some terrible thing and you'll get over it or whatever. It's the very mindset, the belief set that they have made inside of you. Your paradigm that is so wrong and you don't even know. You're stuck like Chuck because you believe that the answer is to keep going to work and sending the kids to school and hoping they go to college. You don't realize that that's only going to make them twofold a child of hell. And if you ever crosses your mind that maybe you should quit and take your family to the woods and build a cabin somewhere in the woods and teach your kids how to chop wood and shovel coal into the furnace, or learn how to make dinner and not just let the maid do it, right? Or live in a small little cabin and spend time outside under the stars around the campfire talking to your children. You have never even considered that possibility. That's just a nice little idea for some little weekend vacation, but it ain't something you could possibly think about doing for the rest of your life. You couldn't even imagine doing it. Why? It's for barbarians. We're evolved, civilized people. We don't live in the nature. We don't eat actual food. We can't even imagine. We don't even understand that every little thing that we eat today, just to start, like forget all the big things, the house and the job, but just the little details about the fact that we think that food, think about this. A lot of people know that canned food, boxed food, poisons, fast food, all that's wrong. We know it, but we keep eating it. But do you realize that even the very basic things, everyday things you eat aren't natural beings? They don't. What if you lived out in the wild like the Native Americans or some tribe in Sweden or Africa or China? They'd go to eating the yucca plant and what did they do? They had like a whole pantry full of different varieties of yucca and cactus and papa berries no, they had like 3 things they ate. Maybe in the spring they'd gather up some green leaves and maybe in summer they would eat whatever berries were growing and put on some fat so they could get through the winter. We have been proved that we can go back and we find bones and excavate men that were under the ground. We know they lived thousands of years ago. We find out they don't have disease, no bone degeneration, no arthritis. They didn't have cancer. Why? Well, most people know they eat more natural, Dave, and they were out in the wild. Okay, but do you know they didn't have beans? Because they didn't have a big field where they grew beans or corn or something, or all this wheat or something. Yeah, wheat was grown as something that people did, and barley and that kind of thing, even back in the days of Jesus. But that was like all they had. They had wheat, barley, and rye, pretty much. Maybe in China they had soy and rice, maybe maybe the natives had maize and sometimes in some particular areas. But they didn't have like a variety of all these thousands of things. And the thing, and this thing they called beans or maize or wheat or whatever was completely different than what it is today. Not only are we eating genetically modified corn and soy and rice and beans, but even the ones you don't know are modified genetically are. They're just not technically called that. And you've probably seen pictures of the ancient corn, the way they used to eat it. It looked nothing like a big, huge corn cob that we see today. It was more like wheat or something. It was completely different. And they didn't eat it as that's all they ate. And they didn't mix it with chemicals and crap. So anyway, the point is that even the beans that we eat every day and think about if you lived in the Appalachians or here in Alabama or where I live and stuff, and it was a few hundred years ago, there were pecans and walnuts and chestnuts and things like that growing. Maybe people ate those kinds of nuts and acorns. Today, you couldn't get somebody to eat an acorn. That's what they ate. And they never got sick or they had diseases and all the things going on today. Now, I'm only bringing that up, and this is not what this video is going to be about at all, but I'm pointing out that these lies that we've been told from the time I can remember, like, oh, everybody's got to eat their vegetables. Vegetables are made, they're not vegetables anymore. They're just some genetically modified thing, and they're just full of starch and sugar, and that's all people eat is sugar, starches, and vegetable carbs. It's killing us. But Jesus gave them fish and bread. But of course, the bread they ate wasn't like the genetically modified grain of wheat and stuff that we eat today. They put lentils, and I'm sure the lentils weren't any kind of lentils like what we have today. They've been genetically modified. They ate bread, which was just these, like the natives that took the yucca and maybe the acorn and ground them down into a flour and made little wafers. That was their bread. It's not like what we think today when we open a loaf of bread and it's full of chemicals and this genetically modified grain and all the oils that we make all of this stuff with, seed oils and vegetable oils, is killing us. And we have no clue. We think, oh, I'm eating whole wheat bread. I'm healthy. And oh, look at this. I'm eating lentils and greens and spinach and stuff. Do you realize that this food that they say is the best for you, because there's all these vitamins like iron in spinach and all stuff, like Popeye says, eat your spinach, right? Do you realize that there's virtually no nutrients that you can absorb and digest from spinach? Did you know that if you fed spinach to a baby, that would kill him? There's too many chemicals and things in spinach that a baby would kill him. Now, a grown-up can tolerate it, but it's the lectins and the polyphenols and stuff like this. I was being told, and I was thinking that all of this was good. We have to live on all of these chemicals and phytochemicals and nutrients and it's anti-aging and all of this. And I had no idea that most of these plants are almost toxic to many creatures, especially humans. And we didn't live eating grass. We cannot digest that fibrous carb. It's killing us. But here's the other thing that it's doing. It's causing us mental illness, stress, and fatigue to the point where we can't even barely go. And what I'm trying to get at is that we don't even know it, so we can't change it. And even if we did know it, we can't change it because we'd have to get out of the norm and live in an environment that doesn't exist anymore. We're literally hanging on by our fingertips to life itself. And we're standing there watching our children die in our presence. And there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing. Unless you want to get your membership card to the Good Old Boys Club, where they will financially protect you or, rip other people off and steal their stuff and deliver it to your door for a price. And then but the worst part is not that you're doing that, but that somehow in your mindset, there is a sense that you're doing it properly, that's what all the good people do. Why, I'm wearing my suit and tie and I'm acting properly and living in a nice house. Well, I'm one of the good guys. I'm conservative. I'm voting for Trump. And we don't even realize that Trump is trying to make the world great again. But what is it that we're trying? What great did we ever have in the last 200 years? Nothing but degeneration till the point it's physically degenerate. Our minds are degenerate. Our morals, we're dying morally and physically and mentally. And the worst thing is we don't know how to even turn it around. There's no way out of this. It's on hellhole, right straight to the bottomless pit of death and destruction. And it's hopelessness. And if it weren't hopeless, then why is it that everyone feels as though it is hopeless? Don't tell me it's not hopeless. Oh, cheer up, Dave. And look, I'm cheering up. I do have a solution. Thank goodness I'll tell you what it is. It's that it's over. Thank goodness it's over. You might as well just sit back and, hang on for a moment. Encourage yourself. Let your kids and your family know, hey, this is done. We're done. There ain't no more here. We can't fix this. Thank goodness Jesus is coming back soon. And about the only thing we can do is try our best to wake up and get out of this world. and don't look back. And yeah, there's going to be some collateral damage. We probably already lost Susie. And Barry's not coming out of prison probably until Jesus comes home. All we can do is send him postcards. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. Frank's so out of his mind on methamphetamines, I don't know. He's probably not going to make it. But the best thing we can do is at least try to get out of the world and offer everybody a solution. Maybe help people get their minds out of this mindset. But I'll tell you what, about the only thing we can really do is tell people the good news of Jesus Christ. People, when they realize, well, see, this is what I really wanted to talk about now after 30 minutes. That, okay, we said it was bad, then we said it was worse. I'm sorry to tell you, but it's going to get just a little bit worse here before it gets better. Sometimes changing people's minds or getting people to be able to come to a place where they can even believe in Jesus, where they can even believe in the truth, where they can even understand the need to get out of the world is going to be almost impossible. Now, trust me, it's not impossible for those who love the Lord, who pray, and who care. No matter whatever happens to the elect, the Bible tells us if it were possible, they would be deceived as well. But the fact is evidently there's just a number of people, a certain predestined group that are predestined for salvation at this time. And I'm not saying we should give up on the rest of them. If it weren't for the elect, they wouldn't have no hope. If it weren't for us, Jesus, we wouldn't have any hope. He loved us. And we love because he first loved us. We wouldn't even know how to love if it weren't for the fact that Jesus came to this world and taught us the truth. Here's the problem. The devil has deceived the entire world, and it is so difficult to change certain individuals' minds so that they can let go of the cookie and get their hand out of the cookie jar and find salvation. Now, let me give you an example. And this is what started the whole thing. Recently, a very good friend of mine, and I'm not going to name names, and I'm not asking you to try and figure out who it might be. I'm only giving you a general view of something here because we have to talk about it. People are dying and falling like flies all around us. And it isn't due primarily to they don't have a good job or some terrible financial thing happened or somebody's sick or whatever. All those are things that happen. But and as I've said, those are terrible, tragic things. But worse than all of that is the fact that some of them have lost their minds, their purpose, their inner truth. They've become deceived in a way that it may be almost too late. Now, I'm going to give you a couple examples, and I'm not saying that any of these people, if some of you may, if you watch this video and you may know what I'm talking about, okay, trust me, some of the people I'm going to be talking about, I don't believe are that far gone. I think that's probably why I'm so hurt by it, is because I think that they're better than this. I don't know what's happening, but it seems to be a spiritual attack upon people, even people that really shouldn't be having these problems. And in other cases, I feel like there are some people that I might be describing that I am worried desperately about whether or not they're going to save their soul, even. And I'm going to get to the root and the bottom of this, but I don't know the ones who have these problems may not be able to understand what I'm going to say here. And I might not be able to do anything to helping these people. But at least if we talk about it, there might be a bunch of you out there that hadn't gone this far or didn't go there. And maybe because of their, because we've talked about it and we've discussed it, maybe you'll be able to see why it wasn't good what they did and why they did what they did. And maybe you can, navigate this maze of lies and deception that the devil has plotted for us, and maybe avoid some of what they've had happened to them. So I was going to say, to start with, there was a good friend of mine that was someone who seemed to be very sincere. I still believe they might be sincere and full of the love of Christ. But they've gotten tangled up in a view that is so seriously unchristian that the Bible calls it the teaching of Antichrist. And so I'm very worried about that. Now, that's where it kind of started. And I felt very sad for that. Not only for them, but for the fact that they're now teaching these things to others. And I see there's a bunch of people listening. And they seem to be persuading some. And so I've done several videos now to try and counter that view. Particularly the view that Jesus has already returned 2,000 years ago. Which, as we have shown from the videos that we did, is just completely Antichrist teaching. And it's very serious. But, so there's that. There's people that are now following these crazy teachings. It seemed like it started even before that, some year or two or three ago, when we noticed that there were individuals and brothers who very wise and people that I kind of looked up to, and people I thought were, intellectuals and had so much, they were so brilliant, and I respected them, and yet then they fell for some of these lies that maybe Jesus didn't ever exist, that he's not a real historical person. Therefore he didn't die for your sins, you see. They don't really take the Bible literally, meaning they don't believe in the gospel. They're teaching another Jesus. Of course, we've got the whole thing. It's been going on now. The Adventists and Jehovah's Witness and groups that were teaching these lies. It's been going for a long, long time. So it's not like it's just started or it's new. But it's spreading in a different venue now. It's going into this sort of a cover of kind of new age, esoteric. It's higher, better wisdom, right, than what we used to know. Oh, we thought the Bible was literal. Ha, ha, ha. It's not really true. See, and so that's serious. That's sad. But it's worse than that. Oh, man, here comes another train. I'm gonna hang on here and wait for this train to go by, and I'll get right back. Okay, this is getting long. That train there's like been 5 minutes, 10 minutes. This train just keeps... I guess we'll have to play some elevator music while we wait. Okay, there. I'm back. Okay, so, what was he talking about? Oh, yeah, it's getting worse. It's worse than that, even. And here's where it's really getting weird, and I want a specific place where it's getting weird, I guess. That's probably what should probably say. I'm noticing this from several quarters. I had some comments on this general idea. I've had some people contact me on this general question. And I've had people get mad and just, leave my channel over it and everything. They're saying that I'm too judgmental. And this is just one aspect of it, I guess. But I'm not talking about poor me, everybody's leaving my channel and calling me names and hoo. No, I'm not, that's not what this is about. What I'm saying is I'm worried for people because I see they have these feelings. What it is I'm going to just say it here. It seems to be a lot of people that are gay okay, and people that maybe are bending towards the transgender movement. And I've been pretty vocal about how I don't believe that's a good thing to be a transgender. I haven't said much about being gay. I think I've done a video on it in the past, a long while back. I'm not trying to be a judgmental person. And I'm not like most Christians that, are running around saying that you're going to go to hell if you do any, I understand that people make mistakes and people have certain problems. And that's not the only problem people have. Like I keep saying, it's actually rampant, the problem. And it has nothing to do with being gay. It has to do with pornography and some kind of perverted mindset that wouldn't actually be happening. It wouldn't be a natural thing that men would be running around. Well, I suppose it's always been that way. I mean, that's why you've always had people that would rape women. You've always had men that... a part of that was because sexuality was repressed. Now, if religion hadn't repressed the natural sexuality, I mean, that was a problem too, where the church would condemn you for two people who decided they wanted to sleep together and they wanted to be together, and then because they weren't of the same faith or race or whatever, I mean, there's all kind of problems we've had in times past. So it's certainly not just happening now, but a peculiar thing is happening now that has never happened before. In the past, we had problems because of repression, and that was true, and it destroyed a lot of marriages and stuff, but it was true both for the man and the woman in two different senses. I think a lot of women in ancient days were, because of the way religion was, that where women had to be veiled and they couldn't do anything or say anything. And I think women were just like passed around, and they didn't even call it rape, but they were bought and sold. I mean, so you can imagine how repressed women were for various reasons. They had to running around wearing bussets and trussets and bras and girdles and whatever else, and be dressed from head to toe, and probably was sweaty, to wear all these clothes, even in the summertime. I mean, it was a terrible thing. And you can imagine how many problems that caused. But what I'm going to talk about today is probably much worse than those kinds of problems. Now, the men in ancient past were also, because of the church, told they had to do this, that, and the other thing. But in order to get around all that so that men could have more, of the pleasures, they would invent stuff like polygamy. And again, men had a lot easier. And yet there were, and so I think maybe in ancient times it was easier, maybe under the law of Moses, it wasn't even as bad. Because women just were bought and sold. They really had no choice, and men had quite a bit of opportunity to fulfill their lustful natures, right? But what happened was, I think in the last couple hundred years, because of this modern Protestantism, that where everybody was, I would never, I never thought of things like that. Why, I'm so pure and like the driven snow, and they had to put on this persona that they never even imagined, such evil things, and they had to speak of it as though it was so awful, and and meanwhile, they would make magazines that you could go behind the counter and get, and every once in a while you get caught with one or something. So there was all this hypocrisy that caused a lot of problems. Because, you see, people didn't know what to do with sex. And I guarantee they don't know what to do with it today. We don't understand why we have desires that, according to the church, or even maybe the government or whoever, depending on what time you lived, and what time of history and stuff you might have lived, you're told that your actual desires are evil. Now let's take a look at, is that true? I mean, would it be evil for a young man to have thoughts of a girl, of a woman, and the desire to lie down carnally with her? No, that has to be perfectly natural. So when you have a culture or an environment where you can facilitate a young man finding a young woman and having a relationship that is mutual and which is healthy, where no one is shamed or misunderstanding their feelings, the men are taught properly what sex is supposed to be, but not just the sex, but they're taught virtually every part of their life. If they were taught maturity, self-control, love and kindness, opening the door, respect, then there would be a lot less problems when a man and a woman, if they treated that relationship wholly and they went into it understanding that the purpose of it was because they had these desires, because nature and the Lord himself gave them these desires because it's a beautiful part of life that when we become an adult, we pair off and we have children and we have these beautiful families. And there's, like I said, there's a lot to this because that couldn't happen, having a beautiful family, right? Because this goes deep now. So the man's going to be expected to provide financially, materially for this woman and his children because they all got to eat. And the way the society and the environment of this world and society is, though, it isn't in a natural sense. We just don't by nature have the means to provide for this woman. So the only way we can do that, and we have to have the woman because this is an innate need. We know we need this, right? And it's the only way for the world to keep going around because we got to have babies. So we've got to fulfill this need. But yet the problem is the woman's not going to be happy with this guy if he's not going to be able to go out and provide for her so that she has a comfortable life, food for her children, and a respectable life where she can hold her head up in the community. Now you say, well, that's not bad. We had that back in the 1800s. No, we didn't, because a man was expected then, back in the 1800s, to go out and work in a mine or out in the field or as a logger or something, a rancher. It was very difficult work. Now, if you were healthy, you could do that, possibly. If you were intelligent and healthy, and you weren't somehow mentally abused so that maybe you didn't have, because of religion, people got mentally disturbed and abused. They didn't even know how to talk to people. So maybe they were shy. They didn't know how to get along with people. Maybe they had their father was a drunk. He was always beating on mom and stuff, and you learn these bad behaviors. I mean, look, there's all kinds of problems that led to these unhappy marriages. And then the men would be unhappy. The woman wouldn't sleep with him. So then he'd have these thoughts in his head, and he may end up, some men would go crazy and they'll go out and rape people or what. I'm not saying there's an excuse for any of it. I'm just saying, yes, the society itself led to this terrible problem. You couldn't blame the young man who was abused in his mind and in his soul and emotions. He didn't even know how to talk to a woman, or he was never even taught to respect her, and maybe he was physically, because they're crossing the plains on a wagon, and he got an infection in his leg and he's dying, or he's eating beans and white flour and sugar, and so that's exhausting, and that will fatigue you, eating sugar and biscuits and pancakes and coffee and heroin and smoking tobacco, right? Whiskey at night. They didn't know the whiskey was bad. Like, well, it's the spirits. You got to drink some every night because it's a long, hard day and you deserve it. Now, leave Papa alone. He's going to have his cigar and his pipe and smoke some, I don't know. Maybe he did heroin. I mean, and then he's exhausted. He can't even go to work, or he's mentally depressed. Same for the women now. The women are passed along. There's no more buying and selling them in the 1800s, but they're still dressed from head to toe. They can't expose themselves. They're not supposed to even think that. You can't even publicly admit that you even like sex if you're a girl. And you're supposed to just, whenever the guy comes along and takes you away and provides this house for you, now you're supposed to be in love with him. What if you're not? And you just don't feel like having any sex with this man who's got this terrible disposition and you don't even like him anymore. So you don't want to put out, and he's mad at you, and then he starts beating you, and then nobody cares, and now you run away, and then they stone you. I don't know. I mean, the problem is just bad. But you see, it gets worse, because now we're talking about the 21st century, which we're going to explain here. And what I want you to understand is that while rape is the most evil thing, I mean, murder, all these things, but there are reasons why people. I just heard somebody say, I mean, there was this big shooting. Jehovah's Witnesses, 8 people died in a murder-suicide thing in Germany. And somebody did a video on it, ex-Jehovah's Witness, and he started off, he says, look, I'm going to say this, and people are going to be upset with me, but I'm going to say it because this is what I believe. He says, shunning people is an act of violence. And I'm like, yeah, good point. I'm so glad you were brave enough to say it. Yeah, I mean, it's not right that man murdered himself and killed 8 people. And Jehovah's Witnesses, as bad as they are, didn't deserve to all die that day in that Kingdom Hall. Okay? Well, maybe not. Maybe none of us deserve that, right? Anybody. The problem is that they are causing this problem by shunning people and abusing their flocks. Oh, here comes another train. Give me another minute, guys. Okay, I can still hear the train going in the background, but anyway, we ain't got time for this, so we're just going to have to talk anyway. You see what I put up with here? I can't wait till I get to New Mexico on that grounds, but I'm right here by this railroad track. But, so, and as the train was going by, I sat here for a couple minutes, all by my little lonesome, looking at the phone, wondering when I could start talking again, and it came to my attention, I don't know why, but I was thinking, okay, I better make sure that what is the, I can't think of the word, clarification or where I can't think of the word. But, you know, when you're saying something and you have to, like when you're telling somebody that might be a cure for cancer or something, and you have to say, oh, I have to say that I am not a doctor and that I cannot promise that this cures anything. Okay, so I need to say before we go further, look, I hope you're not misunderstanding me. These young men in the ancient times and even today who rape women, that is wrong. Okay, it is wrong. We shouldn't be raping people, okay? I hope you know that I believe that. I'm not apologizing or giving any excuses to that because women didn't want to have sex, so therefore men just, No, I'm only pointing out that society is to blame for all the woes of our existence. I don't believe that men would be selfish if they were not taught to be selfish. I don't believe that women would be frigid if that's what they were in those days. I doubt that. I think they weren't allowed to fall in love. But I don't even know if that's true. But that's what I guess we kind of were told, that women in those days, were simply, I mean, come on, they didn't have porn. Women didn't even, as they used to say, they didn't know how to explore their sexuality. And so they just said, no, I've got a headache. And this is the kind of the although I've heard that it might not have been that way, right? It could have been just the opposite in some cases. However, the problems, whatever they might be, are caused from society. And again, it looks like a wonderful society, but in a industrialized age or an agricultural world, it isn't natural. We weren't supposed to tear up all the fields and plant all these things that don't naturally grow and live off of something unnatural. And that's what caused overpopulation. And that's what caused, and then the religions, that's not natural. Teaching, indoctrinating people falsely. They didn't know the truth, and the lies of the devil destroyed the minds of the children. That's all I'm saying. Okay, and I'm going back to a time that we could all look back on. We see the movies, Little House on the Prairie. And of course, that was the ideal of those days. And this was a couple that loved each other, and they raised their children, and it was wonderful, right? Happy days are here again. But that was just a movie. In reality, the women were not happy, and the men were wicked and hurtful, and many times were just depressed, drunken idiots. The last half of their life sitting around smoking a cigar, drinking whiskey, beating their kids and their wives, right? This was not a good situation. And you know what the worst thing about it was? Is that the men probably didn't even know why it was that way. They probably blamed their wife or blamed their kids or blamed something else, when the real truth is that they probably should have realized that they needed the Lord and the truth, and they couldn't find it because they were involved in a world that it was bad. Had they known that, maybe they would have gone out and said, look, this is the right society. I'm not going to participate. If we're going to start voting and making a better world, like the New Deal, right? Well, instead of this deal, we should have made a real deal, right? And maybe Holyfield, the real deal, should have done something about this, because we just allowed them to steer us in a way that was profitable for big business. They needed lots of population, so they fed us a lot of food that makes us taller and bigger and stronger, and yet sicker and mentally ill and depressed. And then they, on top of that, threw us porn all over the place and got our minds all crazy. And we didn't know. It was just completely unnatural, and it caused a great deal of pain. And then they had the excuse to put us all in prison because we were all on drugs or whatever. All right. Here I am 58 minutes into this, almost here. And I've still got a little bit to say. I haven't got to the part where I wanted to talk to you about today. So in our day, what we have is pornography that is so pernicious, and violence, and not just pornography, violence. I mean, we've had violence, R-rated movies, and wicked movies that combine sexuality and violence. And I was just listening to one of the songs the other day, and I remember hearing it when I was younger. Bye bye, Miss America Pie, or whatever. It wasn't that song. I can't remember what song it was. And I was thinking, I remember hearing that song thinking it was kind of a nice song. I never even listened to the words. Basically, the words was over and over and over again. In your mind, you hear this, it's okay to leave your woman and screw the world. There is no deity, and we're just gonna do what we want to do and screw the rest of the world. I mean, it was just, I don't know. That was my that's what I got out of it. And a lot of these songs, that's what it was. And we just listened to it over and over and over again. And the young people grew up with this constant idea of peace and love. And what they meant by that was do what you want for your own benefit. We ought to be able to do whatever we want. Free love. Just, this is when, and then they invented AIDS and told us it was our fault because we had free love. And then they told us to have free love, right? And it got to the point where, there was a time when you weren't allowed to even divorce a woman. And then 20 years later, everybody had 5 different relationships in the last 10 years. And I think it's gotten to the point now where people it doesn't even faze them that you just hook up for a night. I guess they got these dating apps. You just hook up for the night and you go home and it's over. And you don't even treat them with any kind of respect or anything. And it's both ways, women and men. Okay, then it got worse. Oh, we ain't done yet. All right, now what is going on is we've got this violence and this porn and everything, and this religious indoctrination is no longer hateful. Now it's perverted to a place where we've never gone before. Now we should all be mutilating our bodies, becoming zombies. Men should become, little boys should become little girls. And without even telling their parents. And how evil are you for not allowing a 5-year-old to watch porn in the classroom? And we shouldn't even go to school anymore. We should just go down in our basement and jump out. out the window, or what, you know what I'm saying. It's just incomprehensible what's going on. These poor little children right now. And if all of this is going on, and the direness and the war that's raging, and now we can't even go down the road, we might have a shortage of eggs tomorrow, and the next day, the prices are going up, the bank's crashing in California right now. I don't know, this might be the beginning of the end, and we're scared out of our minds. But guess what? The one thing we can do is, I don't want to hear anymore, I don't want to see anymore, I'm just anxious, anxiety. So we just go into our basement and get on our phone, which they've conveniently provided everybody with, that all you do is push a button and you can scroll, or, then that finally gets boring because you got nowhere to go, you got no family. So, you got nobody to talk to. You've been divorced 5 times. Nobody will have you anymore. Now you're too old to even find somebody. And, your health waning, and you spend all your money on that because they've convinced you that if you don't go to the doctor and get their medications, you'll die. And you probably did go to the doctor and you're half dead right now. But, in the last few moments of your life, you've got to, all this goes flashing before you, got to know what you believe. So there's this guy. Here's one of the things that's happened recently. There was this guy that's this ex-Jehovah's Witness channel that I never did really care for. I know you guys think, oh, you're watching all this ex-Jehovah's Witness. No, because I used to be a witness a couple of times. I watched something and now it just keeps popping up in my feed. And so I'm aware of a few of these people. And what I'm finding is that here they came out of this organization, this cult, where they were taught all kinds of terrible things and they're depressed and they don't know what to believe anymore. And now they get out and they get this following on YouTube, and they were telling about how they are exes and they're going to help each other talk about what to do now. And the problem is now some of these guys get to be kind of, people look up to them and listening to them, and they're like exposing now on television that, oh yeah, here's what it is. I'm become an atheist now. Like, we're all going to be your counselor. But the problem is that these people are expecting you to lead them. And you're lost. In your mind, you've lost Jesus. And now here you are, and I'm not going to name any names, but he's one of the biggest ex-JW channels, and everybody's listening to him, and he's sitting there on television exposing this whole thing that he doesn't believe in the Lord anymore. He doesn't believe in religion. I don't know if he believes in Jesus. I don't know what he says he's an atheist. I mean, it's okay to tell people the truth. This is the way he feels, right? But he had a responsibility to help people. Here's the thing. He can't help it, right? But what led him to this? Yeah, we can blame Jehovah's Witnesses, and I do. And we can blame society, and I do. Right? And we can blame the drugs, and we can blame the doctors, and the devil himself. But the problem is that he's nothing but a puny little immature child brat now, who's stomping his feet, demanding that he be happy. And they don't believe in God no more because he's not happy. Why? Because of the repression that he experienced and the societal problems. He no longer knows what to believe. And do you suppose there's a reason why he got to that point? I mean, the witnesses used to say, hey, you can't make it without us. You need your spiritual regulation. Come to the meetings. Well, if you don't have us, you won't make it. Well, in some ways, it's kind of true that most people can't remain mentally stable without a group, a religion, money, or something. If they get off by themselves, they get depressed, they get, and of course it's designed that way. The religion was designed to destroy your mind, to take away the belief in the Lord. And then you go home and you got nothing else, and you scroll on the television, and guess what? They've got porn for you and mental lies and propaganda. But here's the damaging problem. Here's what I think's happening. I think this is what's my mind is, it's like the Lord just kind of showed me this, because I've seen it in several people. They're stuck like Chuck, and here's probably the biggest reason, aside from all the bigger reasons that we talked about. But they're lonely, they're sad, they're full of lust. They haven't learned that they got to go to the Lord and be leaders and fast and pray and be good to people and help people, and be mature and get through this and be an example, but they fell. I can't hardly blame them, but they get to this place where they're just done. And they're depressed and sad and they're mentally ill, probably because of the foods they're eating and everything. Of course, they should know better eating Fruit Loops every day for dinner, breakfast, and lunch. But hey, and a bottle of whiskey. But they're materially, financially, morally, and spiritually bankrupt. And they're laying there scrolling and they're looking at the porn. And then they begin to say, "Oh, I shouldn't do that because God doesn't want me to. The Bible says," well, they've been told all kinds of lies about the Bible. They don't understand what morals really are. They don't understand anything, see? They're all confused. And then the porn, I believe it's a concerted plot to destroy the minds and the hearts of all these people. What they've done is they have put enough evil, perverted garbage on the television and on the pornography and stuff that they're luring these people into sexual fantasies that they would never have thought of before. I mean, do I think that the average person, if exposed to it, could become get involved in bestiality and pedophilia? I do think let me give you this example. Could anyone of any person, any time in history or whatever, morally, wherever they were in life, could they be lured somehow into the idea that they could go out and murder somebody? Probably, and here's why. If you torture them, if you kick them around enough, if you abuse them, and they don't know morally about if they don't know that there is a good world, that the Lord does love them, that the world really would be fair, but some evil people have taken over and they don't have an incentive to go and fight for their children to overcome this evil. If they just get depressed and saddened, they give up because they feel they're defeated, because they were told they're worthless, because they don't know the love of Christ. And they don't know how this works, that everybody can get angry, and that can lead them to violent, bad habits, where they get violent, and then it goes too far, and then they hate themselves, and then they go out and do bad, worse stuff. And yeah, I mean, I do believe that you can destroy a human being. And by the same token, you could lead a child to insanity, and they could go and murder people. Maybe some guy that used to be a Jehovah's Witness, you'd think he was a normal, good person, and all of a sudden one day he's committing a murder-suicide in Germany somewhere. Yes, this shunning promotes violence, as I said before. So, by the same token, when you take all these kids and you keep them bored, you tell them that there's no Lord, that all religions are wrong, they don't know what to believe, and then they're bored and they're lost their families and their lives and they're feeling sorry for themselves, and so then they start out of desperation to just watch porn, and they get exposed to some crazy perverted ideas, and they think that somehow that's just natural. Oh, here comes the train again. Hold on. All right, the train's kind of in the background now. So I was thinking, okay, here's an example of what I'm trying to say. Maybe help to understand this. Imagine that there was a job that all the men in the community had to perform in this little village or community. And you got to be, say, you're supposed to, when you're 18 or say in this culture, you went and you got this job. Now let's say that for whatever reason, it could be that your parents didn't teach you the preliminaries that most of the other parents taught their children. Or you were new to the community and didn't know what they were doing. And they had watched their fathers do it, and so they were more prepared. But for whatever reason, you're 18, they put you, in the chair, and you were supposed to perform this job like all the others, like normal kids in the village. But you weren't good at it. And everybody else was just do. And within 3 or 4 days, they'd get knack of it, and they were just, doing and being given praises and awards and accolades and all of this. But you messed up and destroyed something. You couldn't function the way everyone else was functioning, doing, and no one seemed to be very proud of you. In fact, you might end up getting fired, and then they'd have to demote you to, janitor or something. And so you went home, told your parents, and they just shunned you and said, "You're no kid of ours, you're worthless." And of course, no one would really, probably, odds are no one would ever sit you down and say, "Look, this isn't your fault, young man. You're a normal kid. You just didn't know how to do this because you're new," or whatever. And maybe in your own mind you think, "Well, it's not fair. I'm new," or, I don't know. But no one wanted to listen, and you were shunned, and you were angry because you kind of saw a girl you liked, but because you didn't have a job and now you weren't going to be able to be normal, upstanding young man, you had no shot at getting that girl. And then your last hope just came down crashing to the ground when at the end of the school year, the girl you liked, you didn't have the guts to even ask her out because, you felt so worthless, and your dad was about ready to, disown you or sell you to the neighbors or whatever. And your mom, seemed very disappointed in you. Even your brothers and were laughing at you, and your friends and people in your neighborhood. And so you didn't have the guts to go ask her out. And sure enough, you're just getting ready to ask her out, and boom, this one kid that's always making fun of you asks her out first, and they end up getting married. And now there you are, and you got nothing. And you got no more. Your parents didn't teach you any morals about right and wrong, or how to overcome, or that somebody loved you or cares for you. You just felt so worthless that what could that drive you to become? Maybe even then you didn't purposely want to do harm to anybody. But maybe because you became homeless, you didn't have a job, and you went on the street. Every time somebody come by, they'd kick a can at you and hurl, accusations. And so you went off and became a homeless bum. Maybe you never even did anything bad. Maybe you were such a wonderful person, you bore it all. But you still got all the shame, and nobody likes you. You never had a life. You could understand how that kind of life that's unfair, and certain people feel that way, why they would lead to a very poor life, if not even possibly going crazy and doing something just crazy. But now imagine that they've made a situation where they're trying to make as many children like that as possible. That's the goal, is to destroy all of our children and our families. And when they get you in that situation, now you're this homeless person on the street and you don't know what to do. You got nowhere to go, but guess what? You still get a free phone. And the one thing you can never do, they've told you, if you ever murdered somebody, you're done. You got to be murdered yourself. Or if you ever rape somebody, or if you ever become a homosexual, this is another one of those things that you can never do in certain circles of society. Now there's a group or a part of society that welcomes it and says, "Oh, you should do this and become a transgender." And the rest of the world's like, "What? What happened here? What is this moral change? And why is this insanity?" Well, there's a number of people that want to now be homosexual because they got depressed and lonely and scrolled and were doing the porn for months and months and got into this weird fetishes and fantasies and they didn't know what was happening until they began to, not to mention the fact they were already depressed and become atheists by this time. And now they're really atheists because they think God don't love them. They think God hates them because they don't know how to change. Somehow they've it's not natural that people are angry and become murderers, but people who are abused become angry and become murderers. It's not natural that people just develop the desire to go out and spurn the opposite sex, and they don't want a family, and they don't want to build a life and have a home, and all these normal things that people are supposed, like we're told in the little book, in the little storybook with the little, storybook ending about how, they all live happily ever after. That story, that's not what we got. And nobody seems to understand it. Instead, they just blame. They don't say, oh, well, the reason this has happened to you, young man, is these poor people, they destroyed your mind and your soul, and you're eating wrong, and you're doing all these things, and all you got to do is understand what's going on here. Don't fall. Don't become an atheist. Look, it's not God's fault, and explain it to them. They never heard the gospel. So this is what's happening, friends. There are a lot of people that still have good hearts. They're struggling. They're trying to figure it out. But they have been taken down a pathway of lies, and they don't know what to do. They become so angry and violent and mean. They don't even have to talk to anybody. They're always screaming. They've gotten into several fights. Now they don't trust themselves. Nobody ever comes along and explains to them, look, we're all in the same boat. Every human being is a sinner. and even that word, sinner, we're just people. We're not sinners. We're little children. We're innocent. It is not our fault that society and things are the way they are, that we were abused and kicked and put in a cage, and our mama died when we were 5, and none of this is our fault, and the Lord loves us all. And yeah, it's a sin to do it's a sin for a man to run around having sex with different women and never having any commitment to any of them. And how many men do that? They're all sinners. Well, so they're not worthy of life? No, the Lord loves all of us. But he's looking for one person who's out there, who's willing to get on their knees, because the Lord can help. But you need the mind of the Spirit, the mind of Christ, and you need the truth. You need to read the Bible and be able to learn, let the Holy Spirit explain it to you, and let the Holy Spirit educate us into the truth that leads to eternal life, and then encourage one another and become strong and to become great citizens and brothers, great brothers and sisters to our brothers and sisters. But we don't know how anymore. The devil won. On a major, worldwide scale, the devil's won. And this is what the Bible said. The great apostasy has come. And it's going to, and so here's the conclusion. I am way over. And I'm going to bring this to a close now, because I wanted to talk more about this, but it seems like we just don't have the time today. But hopefully you got what I'm saying. Whoever you are, no matter what you've done, if you've murdered somebody, if you've touched somebody inappropriately, or you have thoughts you don't know what to do with, you must understand, while at the same time that it's not your fault, and the Lord still loves you, and you're no more worthless than any other person that's ever lived. You're absolutely the most important thing in the world. Jesus said that he would leave the 99 and go after the one sheep that was lost. If you're that one sheep that's lost, and trust me, to be honest with you, probably most people are completely lost. And they're lying around, they don't want to tell anybody else, but they're lying around in their bedroom with the whiskey bottle, and they're watching the porn, and their minds are screwed up, and they don't know who they are, and they're scared out of it. It's probably most everybody. So what are we going to do? Well, first thing we're going to do is understand Jesus loves us. Let's get back to the gospel. Let's not point the finger. We're not to judge our brothers. I'm not judging any of you, because I understand. I've been angry. I've been hurt. I've been abused. I've had relationships, many relationships. I could not find or make any of them work myself. And for years, I didn't know what was wrong with me. But now I understand that it's the world. It's not my fault. And it's the same for you and for every one of us. And the Lord loves us, but he doesn't want us to get discouraged and fall apart and die. And he doesn't want us to give up on the Lord Jesus. Because that's not the answer. That's not the truth. In fact, all of this just proves that the Bible is true. Because Jesus predicted this 2,000 years ago. And he told us what to do when it happens. He told us to pray. And not to give up. And to encourage one another. And to love one another. And friends, you must understand that we are now at the precipice. At the door. And you cannot give up on yourself. Please don't. Please do not give up on yourself. And if you've done things that maybe the Bible says is not right, don't give up on yourself. And if you can't just stop cold turkey or something, we don't judge one another. That's between you and the Lord, and the Lord loves you. The Lord will help you and work you through it. He's not demanding that you be perfect. But the Lord wants you to be happy. And he knows you can't be happy unless you're normal and you have a normal life and you have children, and we grow up into maturity, become responsible and loving and good, and we know and understand the truth and have a relationship with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So, for those of us who already have a little strength, and we can carry on, we need to go out and find, like soldiers of Christ, we need to go out and find those who need our help and start doing stuff to help our brothers across the line. Because we can't make it alone. None of us are an island. And for those of us that are down in the dumps and we don't know what they're going to do, we don't think we have the strength to go on, don't give up. The Lord knows you're there. He knows you're in that situation. He doesn't condemn you. He wants you to cry out and call to him. It may take time. You need to pray and fast and seek him. He will rescue you. He will love you. He will figure it out. It'll be okay. Just have faith. Anyway, I've got to go because we're way over the time today. I hope that this has helped somebody. And I think we'll probably have to do another video or so on this subject as well soon. I'm going to go ahead and go, guys. We'll see you guys tomorrow. May the Lord bless you. Stand strong. In Jesus' name, we'll see you tomorrow.